Since Battalion has been thrown into the media spotlight recently after releasing its first 15 minutes of raw gameplay footage of their pre-alpha build, there has been a lot of mixed opinions, confusion, and both admiration and disappointment from people, as expected with pretty much every game release. But I feel like a lot of the disappointment and confusion is misplaced either by lack of knowledge or generally bad media previously proclaiming information to the viewers that was incorrect. Battalion, of course, up until partnering with Square Enix, was mostly funded by its Kickstarter campaign, and from this campaign it seems a lot of people drew the conclusion the game would be somewhat of a realistic, authentic World War II shooter, similar to that of Red Orchestra, when that was never the intention. I have no doubt since the Kickstarter Battalion's direction of the game has changed somewhat in terms of being more competitively focused than originally intended, and on top of this some miscommunication on their part during the process over the last year. But I still believe that the original intended idea and base mechanics of the game, which a lot of people seem to be confused about, have always been the same. The first opening line on the Kickstarter reads that Battalion 1944 recaptures the core classics of multiplayer shooters and propels World War II into the next generation, utilising the most advanced industry technology. And it's crafted by designers who have grown up by playing Medal of Honor and Call of Duty 2. It then under this states that it's fueled by the power of Unreal Engine 4 and it resurges World War II back into the modern gaming spotlight in our spiritual successor to the great multiplayer shooters of the past such as Call of Duty 2 and Enemy Territory. So from these two paragraphs alone, it should be no surprise that the game is intended to play like an old school shooter such as Call of Duty 2. Not only in word form, but the Kickstarter video begins by stating they want to recapture the core classics of shooters such as Medal of Honor and again Call of Duty 2.
Battalion recaptures the core of classic multiplayer shooters, crafted by designers who've grown up playing games like Medal of Honor and Call of Duty 2.
And as stated by another YouTuber who pointed this out called Prowler Caboose, they're even playing Call of Duty 2 in the video. They're jumping around, strafing, basically identical style of gameplay as showed in the Battalion gameplay video. Authentic is somewhat of a broad term, but as stated here in the Oxford Dictionary, it means to be made or done in a traditional or original way, or in a way that faithfully resembles the original. I was fortunate enough to grow up playing games such as Medal of Honor, Call of Duty 1 and Call of Duty 2, and they just stated they wanted to create a game designed to recapture the gameplay of those games while it being an authentic World War II experience in the next clip. When you merge these two clips together, as you should because they're only a few seconds apart in the video, I find it difficult to see how there would be any thought of an outcome so far stretched from the current build, such as Red Orchestra, Day of Infamy or even Squad. If a company said to me that they were making a game that would be a classical shooter similar to games such as Quake, I would expect it to play like Quake, and in this video they have stated that they're planning to make a game that plays like a classic shooter, like Call of Duty 2, therefore to me, I feel like the game is going to play like Call of Duty 2. It feels like a lot of people were only selectively hearing what they wanted to with the authentic World War II shooter part and not really taking in the information of the classical shooter and the examples that the game is supposed to be based on. The other times the word authentic was used within the text version of the Kickstarter is where they stated that they travelled for research purposes to make maps as authentic as possible and the sound as authentic as possible. And that isn't wrong because the game visually and orally is an authentic World War II experience. The movement on the other hand and the movement mechanics are not, because it was never stated anywhere that it would be. They stated many times, not only in the Kickstarter but for the last year in the development of the game, that the movement would correspond to that of a classic shooter, which is where I think a lot of the problems lie. Many people who are now looking at this game and have never played Medal of Honor or early COD games on the PC, the whole era is non-existent to them, either due to age or because PC gaming wasn't that big 13, 14, 15 years ago when these games were popular. I've seen many YouTube videos from other YouTubers questioning why this happened, why is the game like this isn't what I expected, and the large majority of their viewers agree. And these tend to be ones with followings that desire a game such as Red Orchestra, Squad, Day of Infamy or Battlefield. And they're confused why the game has turned out like this when they believe they were promised something different from the original Kickstarter, but you were not. As I stated earlier, the game's development has no doubt changed slightly, and this is because they're building off an already a base of a classical shooter like COD 2, and they've added a sprint function and then based the movement off COD 4 Pro Mods mechanics. Battalion is essentially COD 4 Pro Mods mechanics with COD 2, and if you look at the gameplay that they released, it pretty much is just COD 2 with COD 4's movement. It's exactly what they said it was going to be, a classical shooter that goes back to the base of good mechanics. Now again, moving past the whole authentic and classical shooter stuff, the people's complaints are because of the movement, as it doesn't represent an authentic World War II game. But again, on that point, it was never supposed to be. One of the biggest issues, I believe, is a very large majority of people are just not familiar with COD 4 Pro Mod on the PC. They make claims such as too much bunny hopping, many YouTubers comparing the strafing system to that of Quake. The game is supposedly like World War II Quake. It's not similar to Quake, it's identical to COD 4 Pro Mod, which yes, does use an edited version of the original Quake engine because all older Call of Duties did, but the premise of the movement system between Quake and COD 4 Pro Mod is very, very different. The level of movement and the way the players move in terms of speed and consistency in arena shooters such as Quake is nothing like the explosive movement system seen in games like COD 4 Pro Mod. Players do not just bunny hop around or strafe constantly trying to maintain high velocity. In Quake you are a lot of the time always moving. In COD 4 Pro Mod and COD 2 there is a lot of downtime where you're literally doing nothing other than holding an angle or moving around the map very slowly, crouching, proning, tactically to gain map advantage. By explosive gameplay I mean exactly that. 1 second you're moving very slow and the next you're sprinting or jumping, or strafing is where this whole problem comes from. And you can see this happening even in this very short clip.
Round that front A, they bounce to receive and link in there as well. Gets one, can he get a second? Yes, he can. Fantasy, absolute animal.
And you may be wondering why I'm wasting my time comparing Quake and COD 4 Pro Mod's movement to Battalion, but the point is this. The player in the video is Joe Brammer, the main developer at Battalion. He has obviously spent time previously playing COD 2 and COD 4 Pro Mod, therefore he is a capable player, which is the reason why the gameplay looks like this. You can take almost any game and put one capable player and one incapable player against each other and the two styles of gameplay would look entirely different, therefore making the whole game seem as if it plays different. If you were to watch me play COD 4 Pro Mod or Battalion and then put me against a 40-year-old who hasn't spent 10 years playing FPS games professionally next to me and watch him, it would look like he's actually playing Squad or Day of Infamy or Red Orchestra, because he would be moving so slow and crouching around and proning. He wouldn't be running around strafing, jumping, moving fast. They could have chose somebody with very little FPS or capable FPS experience to play in the Battalion video, and then people wouldn't be complaining as much about the speed or how jumpy the game looks, because the game isn't that fast all the time, neither is it that jumpy all the time. The map is very small and they're playing on TDM, and of course you're watching a capable player able to control the movement mechanics. If you put John from down the road on the game, like they probably had loads of EGX where the public could play the game, and it will look and play a lot slower and more tactical because they're simply not very good. John does represent a large proportion of the community. If you are a John and you're playing other Johns, the game is going to be a lot slower. And that's not to say even if you are a very good player or playing at the highest level, the game isn't always going to be fast either. There's no way when this game enters the alpha stage it's going to be played this fast all the time. It's unrealistic. It's literally just a developer running around the server, killing people who, frankly, nothing against the other developers, love you all, are worse than Joe at the game. But if you put Joe in a server with previous COD 4 pros or COD 2 pros, then his gameplay on this video would be filled with death and movement of a slug, because any time that he jumped around like this, he would be dead in a second. So coming all the way back to why does the game play like this, it looks nothing like the original video where they move around like clunky bots. The reason is because it was a very, very early alpha video, and the gameplay they showed originally didn't play anything like an old school shooter that they mentioned. Once they had funding from the Kickstarter, I assume they could actually hire top animators and really work on the movement system they said that they would make, which is what they have now. Which goes back to my point, if you looked at the original clunky horrible movement and then read the Kickstarter and the other stuff where it said the game would be like Medal of Honor, COD or Enemy Territory, which is a very fast paced game, and thought it was going to be a slower paced game like Red Orchestra, then unfortunately you just didn't really understand the goals and fundamentals that the game was to be based on, either because you chose to ignore the information about the classic shooters or you weren't informed about the games it was going to be based on. Although the whole use of the word authentic seemed to confuse a lot of people in the Kickstarter, you can't ignore all of the other information that was stated, what the game would be like, what it would be based on, and it turned out exactly like that. Another very quick point is that people are angry about the graphics because they're not on par with today's AAA titles, and there's no denying it's not. And the graphics look worse in the gameplay video than the Kickstarter video, because I imagine that the video's footage wasn't taken from a fully fleshed out map, and instead just small sections made in Unreal for the Kickstarter video. On top of that, the game up until this point has had a predominantly huge focus on the fundamentals, mechanics and optimization to make the game play well and not just look nice and play like shit like most of today's games. You can always increase graphics, add textures, improve lighting once you have a good base game to work on. But once you've created a nice looking game which barely runs at 60 frames and it's optimized really badly and plays like shit, it's a very long process to then go back and optimize the game and fix all of the core fundamentals when you could have just created it right the first time around. I have no doubt the graphics will improve with the game's development. It's all about having the right base to work on. And on the point of that base, these movement values that are in the game currently are probably not final. There is only a small section of people who have played the game extensively up until this point, so the purpose of the alpha is to change and tweak values to find the best outcome after having a large audience play the game. So to finalise, I think that the Kickstarter could have been better explained and the communication could have been better between Bulkhead and the public with the direction of the game after the Kickstarter, in terms of adding sprint especially. But I don't believe that if you read and understood the Kickstarter originally, you could be shocked to find that the game plays more like COD 2 than Red Orchestra. And by the way, just to point out, just in case, the whole strafing system doesn't only exist because of sprint. Strafing is a very large part of both COD 1 and COD 2. Even without sprint in Battalion, strafing would still exist, so therefore the game wouldn't be an authentic World War II shooter because it was never meant to be. It would still have strafing and faster movement without the sprint. It was meant to follow and play like classic shooters from 10 to 15 years ago, and it does. As far as I can see, they've created exactly what they said they would create. An old school classic World War II shooter. Thank you for watching and goodbye. But if you do still have a potato PC, there are some pretty awesome optimization settings you can use within the game. Unfortunately, I don't have the menu to show you, but you can basically, within the game menu, there are graphic options which turn off certain aspects which don't affect the gameplay. For example, you can turn off any foliage such as trees outside of the map bounds or walls.